Hello everybody, welcome to Culture Academy. Today we want to talk about high context culture and low context culture. I will give you a little example and I hope you can try and figure out if it's high culture or low culture. Let's go.
What year did Christopher Columbus sail the ocean blue?
1887.
19 something, right? 18 something. 17. I have no idea.
1969.
In 1882.
Who won the Civil War?
Who won the Civil War?
We did? The South?
Like the one in 1965 or?
You're driving down the highway going 80 miles per hour.
80? Is that right?
How long does it take you to go 80 miles?
Can you guys name any cities in France?
Spain.
Spain. This is a country.
Venice? Venice? No, not Venice.
I know it's in my head, but it's not coming out.
This was a great example of people from a low context culture. So what are the differences between high context and low context cultures? Let's look at it right after the intro. Well, cultural understanding is like a geographical map. When Christopher Columbus sailed out in 1492 to discover India, he knew Portugal, Spain, and maybe a little bit more of Europe. There was a lot of unknown territory in these days to discover. When we move into another country and also into another culture, we want to learn about the culture and about the people. We step out into the unknown territory. We need to learn about the environment and the surroundings of the people. Simply talking about cultural differences and how we must respect them is a hollow cliché. Cultural logic depends on the concept of correct interpretation. One must explain the entire system. First of all, we need to ask, what is context? Context is a connection, is a link, the relation of the words or event that we are dealing with. Well, let's look at a short definition of context. First, in literature. In literature, it's a part of discourse that surrounds the word and the passage and can throw light on its meaning. But context does not only exist in literature or in written form. There's also context within culture. So let's look at the definition of context in culture. Context in culture are the circumstances that form the setting for an event or for a situation, for a statement or an idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood. If we deal with culture, we always need to consider the context, the environment, the thought patterns, the values, the belief systems of the people. And if we want to understand the people right, and if we want to communicate well, we need to look at the context. These are innate social behavior patterns that were once learned but that drive us now unconsciously. These hidden patterns are a system of controls which govern the behavior and the perception of the people without thinking. The anthropologist Edward Hall distinguishes between high context culture and low context culture. So what are high and low context cultures? A high context communication or message is one in which most of the information is already within the person, while very little is in the coded, explicit, transmitted part of the message. High context culture is like a computer that has been fed with a lot of data. The person has accumulated over time a lot of general knowledge and information and stores it internally. A low context communication is just the opposite. The mass of the information is vested in the explicit code. The person gives you a lot of information right now in the dialogue. So let's look at the properties or at the expressions of high and low context cultures. So let's contrast the high context communication and low context communication. In the high context, there's implicitly embedded meaning at different levels of the socio-cultural context. The low-context culture overtly displays meanings through direct communication forms. In the high-context culture, we value indirect verbal interaction, and it is more able to read the non-verbal expressions. In the low-context culture, we value the direct verbal interaction, and is less able to read the non-verbal expressions. High-context culture tend to give simple, ambiguous, non-contextual messages. Low-context communication cultures tend to emphasize highly structured messages, give details, and place a great stress on words and technical signs. High-context communication emphasizes a spiral logic. Low-context culture emphasizes a linear logic. In the high-context communication, we need little background information. The low-context communication culture needs a lot of background information. The high-context culture, the people keep themselves informed. They feel impatient and irritated when asked from a low-context people or person for information they should already know. The low-context communication people gather information. They feel lost if they have not enough information, and they normally know how to and where to look it up. High context culture people have extensive information networks among family, friends, colleagues, and clients. Low context culture people do not have extensive personal information network systems. In the high context culture, people value the groups, the family, the community. But in the low context culture, people value the individual. Because people value the group in the high context culture, they take time to cultivate and establish a permanent personal relationship. Low context culture tend to develop transitory personal relationships, and they can be left when they don't need them anymore. In the high context culture, the people tend to use more feeling in expression. In the low context culture, people use more logic to present ideas. If you organize a conference in the high context culture, the speaker is more important than the topic of the conference. The mere presence of certain individuals endows the group and its activities with authority and status. In the low context culture, the topic of the conference is much more important than the speaker. When it comes to an appointment, in the high context culture, it's a question, who is coming? With whom do I have this appointment? It can be of short notice, and also it can be changed. An attendance at functions is rather the matter of prestige associated with the function. Therefore, invitations to high-level meetings and conferences will be issued sometimes on short notice. And a person will not keep an appointment if the chance for a more important and more prestigious appointment will come up. In a low-context culture, an appointment is very important. And it's important how long ago the appointment was made, very often very far in advance. And there won't be any changes to the appointment. If possible, we can keep the appointment and don't let it go. In a high context culture, information flows freely from many different sides. In a low context culture, we have specific information channels. Normally, the boss gets information relevant for the job from a few people only. In a high context culture, disturbances are seen as a chance to gather information. In a low context culture, disturbance is seen as very negative. Well, in France, I was very surprised when I was in a store and I had to deal with some people and there was a long line. I always saw people going in and cutting the line and going in front to the person there and interrupting, and they would say, "Well, excuse me, I have a big problem, and can you help me?" And nobody in the line complained about the people cutting the lines, and I thought, what is this? Why are they cutting the line? Until I understood the person that cuts the line and goes to the person serving the customers. For the person serving the customers, this problem always was an interruption, but it was a welcomed interruption because they could learn new things. They could help that person. The French culture is much more high context than low context, and as we said, the interruption is a welcome thing to learn new things and to have another relationship with a person. Now let's look at what kind of countries are more high context cultures or low context cultures. So there are a variety of cultures who are on this scale, and we talked about the cultural scales, are on the one side of the scale or on the other side of the scale. Some are in the middle. Let's look at different cultures. So if you look at China and Japan and Saudi Arabia, they would be more on the left side of the scale. We also can find there Kenya and Thailand. They are very high context culture. In the middle, first we would say, well, we find the Latin European countries like France, Italy, and Spain, but also Mexico and Brazil would be on the middle scale. Then on the low scale, low context cultures are definitely Denmark, the Netherlands, Canada, Germany would fit in there, and also the US, as we have seen in the introduction. The US is a very low context culture. So what do we do with this? You need to know the nature of the other system to avoid cultural collisions with the other culture. We need to know the context. It is very important for our understanding of the culture. It's very important also for our behavior within the culture. Do I behave right in a high context or in a low context culture? And of course, it's more important for our communication. How do I communicate right with people from the other culture in order to understand and also to be understood? And we will look at communication in one of our next videos, communication in the high context culture and the low context culture. So please tell us your experience, leave a comment down there. What have you experienced maybe in a high context culture or in a low context culture? And don't forget to subscribe and hit the button and come back next time to our channel and learn about understanding other cultures. So thank you very much and goodbye.